Welcome to Mindscapes, our series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today founded a Vedanta Institute at Ma Lovely. And I wonder if there is a symbolism to that, because when I asked him how I pronounce this, he said it's Ma and Lovely, but we'll get to that in a moment. He's lectured at seminars and institutions around the world. He's authored a definitive treatise on the Vedanta and another definitive book on the symbolism of Hindu gods and rituals. His unique contribution to Vedanta has been a very contemporary interpretation that has made it accessible to modern dilemmas and predicaments. I'm delighted to welcome Swami Parthasarathy.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell me, what is the significance of the title Swami, and how does it come about?
The title Swami is one who is dedicated to the understanding and realization of the self. So he is committed and found himself the ultimate self and is trying to communicate to others.
And is this sort of a title that a person gives to himself to as a public expression of that commitment? Is it sort of like a degree, or is it something that someone gives by virtue of having attained something? How does this title
It's
work?
done in different ways. One takes what is known as Diksha from a master. There's a ceremony, there's a ritual. You could also take upon yourself, and it's accepted by the Hindu society that you are a Swami yourself. So the third is a person like me. I'm not a Swami in the sense of taking ochre robes, but it's sort of conferred by the public by their own choice. In fact, I'm just a grihastha, I mean a family person. So for many years they've been calling me Swami. So when I pronounce my name in the telephone and said I'm Parthasarathy, they would say, may I talk to the Swami please? Yes, I'm Parthasarathy. May I talk to the Swami please? And the third time I would say, I'm Swami speaking, and then they'll start conversation. So it was being conferred upon me.
You have studied deeply and written deeply on the Vedanta, and you draw incisively from it. It's sort of almost a cliched question, but what is the essential teaching of the Vedanta from the enormous vastness of the literature? What are some of the core principles? Is there an equivalent, and I hate to sort of make an analogy, but an equivalent of the Ten Commandments, say, that is it something that we can encapsulate?
See, what Vedanta, the word Vedanta is derived from two words, Veda and Anta. It only means, Veda means knowledge, Anta means end, it's end of knowledge. Now, it actually deals with the improvement of the individual. As you all know, life consists of two factors, that is the individual and the world. The world has been improved by science, but the individual has been neglected to a point of fault. And unless the individual is developed, any amount of development of the world is not going to help. If you carefully analyze the world today, you will find one part of the world very active, productive, prosperous. Like the whole of Western world, they're very active and prosperous. But from their own admission, they've lost the peace of mind. But you go to the Eastern countries, you find them relatively peaceful and happy. But there's no action, there's no production, there's no prosperity. So where there is peace, there's no prosperity. Where there is prosperity, there's no peace. So how to combine dynamic action with perfect mental peace, that's what Vedanta is all about.
What is it from the Vedanta that you draw upon as your unique and singular interpretation that you emphasize and feel is most valid and meaningful and relevant to today's predicaments?
The individual has not been dealt with so perfectly in any literature as in Vedanta. In Vedanta actually is considered Sanatana Dharma, means eternal principles. They are the internal principles from which all religions have sprung. Religion, as you know, is based on one personality. If you take away Christ, there's no Christianity. If you take away Buddha, there's no Buddhism, etc. So Vedanta is not based on any particular person. It is knowledge, a knowledge of your own personality. So that doesn't go through various interpretations. It's only a statement of facts. So Vedanta fixes your identity, helps you to identify yourself. And unless you identify yourself, you're not able to relate to the world. Now, in short, what I'm saying is, people believe that happiness is in the world. So they are rushing into the world, making this world a better place to live in, not realizing that it is your relationship with the world that gives you peace or otherwise. I give a simple example. Cigarette, being the same, produces pleasure to one, pain to another. A lady, being the same, is divorced by one, another person is seeking her hand. So the cigarette produces pleasure, pain, the lady produces joy and sorrow. So it's not the world that produces pleasure or pain or joy and sorrow. It's how you meet it, how you contact it, your relationship with the world. And you can maintain a right relationship with the world only when you identify yourself. Just as a drunken person who's lost his identity cannot maintain a right relationship in the world, therefore he suffers. Similarly, Vedanta tells you, look, find your identity. Make sure that you understand yourself. And once you understand yourself, your inner equipments and how they function, you will be able to maintain a right relationship in the world, and thereafter you have no cause for any stress or strain in this world.
What do you mean by identify yourself? Become mindful of oneself, vipassana, just to be aware and to let be, to be able to sort of understand it in relational terms. What do you mean by identify?
Yeah, it's a good question. You see, what I mean is, when an actor goes on the stage, he goes through gruesome tragedies. He goes through hilarious comedies. He is not tickled when there's a comedy. He is not suffering when there's a gruesome tragedy. So he could be playing the Hamlet and deciding whether he should live or die. In the play Hamlet, the young man, his father is murdered by his uncle, and the ghost tells him, look here, your father has murdered me, your uncle has murdered me. So he is sitting down on a precipice deciding to be or not to be the question. That's the question. So he is undergoing a terrible tragedy, but he is all the time remembering that he is Mr. So-and-so acting on the stage. He never loses his identity, whether it's a tragedy or comedy. So when he doesn't lose his identity, we say he has kept his identity right through. Similarly, Shakespeare says in As You Like It, all the world is a stage and all men and women are mere players. They have their exits and their entrances. So you must play your role and get out. So you could be a carpenter, you could be a plumber, you could be a preacher, you could be a teacher. It doesn't matter what role you play. But when you play these roles, you must constantly remember that you are the self functioning. The self is your identity. So once you maintain that identity in and through the various roles you play in this life, you would never have a problem.
But isn't it also a part of the aspiration that self that you refer to in some ways needs to be subsumed in the universal self. And there is a great deal of understanding, insight, and discussion now on the whole issue of interdependence, and that the self cannot be isolated in that sense, and that an overemphasis on the self, could lead to problems of egotism and other sort of perversions. So what is this balance between being aware of the self and yet being...
See, the person who's commenting on it has no idea of the self. So you got to be a musician to understand music. You got to be a top-class cricketer to understand the difference between Tendulkar and Brian Lara. See, similarly, if these people who are commenting on the self should have some access to self. This self that I'm talking is different from the egoistic self that you are referring to. I know you're just quoting them. Now, the self is universal. It's something like it's not electricity, but I'm saying its comparison is electricity is universal. Electricity passing through a bulb produces light. Passing through a heater produces heat. Passing through a cooler produces cold. But electricity has no heat or cold, no movement or light. It is a sakshi. It is not governed by these gadgets. Similarly, the self is universal. There is no yourself and myself. There is no Christian self or Hindu self or Muslim self. It's universal. But when the self identifies with your equipments like the body, mind and intellect, you develop an egoistic individuality. This individuality has the ego, not the self. So the moment you move towards the self, you become universal.
You have written extensively and spoken on the doctrine of karma.
Yes.
As we record this, we're looking at the Gujarat earthquake, and people are wondering why so many people in Gujarat must suffer, and how come there was a complementarity of karma that this happened, or is it karma? Briefly, how does karma unfold itself, particularly in such large social contexts?
Right. Karma, the law of karma just talks about cause and effect. Take away cause and effect, there's no world. The world is nothing but an expression of cause and effect. You don't go through engineering college and become a doctor. You don't go through medical college and become an engineer. If you have not opened a book, you don't become a literate. It's the law of karma. If you have eaten this much of chilies, you won't be sitting here. So the law of karma is immaculate, irrefutable. There's no question about it. Now, this vision that you say of Gujarat, what had happened, is also just the law of karma. Now, that particular end, those people needed. Now, why this big noise is because recognition is because it all happened at one time. Like a plane crash, 300 people die at a time, and you are all wondering why these people died at a time. Not realizing that philosophy applies to all beings, not human beings. Human beings are just, how many, 6 billion, 8 billion? 6 billion. 6 billion is infinitesimal compared to the total population of living beings. If you take the total population of living beings, it's infinitesimal. So when you're boiling your water or making tea at home, thousands of creatures are killed. Now you don't have the vision, you don't see it. Moment to moment, thousands and thousands are dying at a time. And once you see something collectively, you're making a big noise. So it is nothing extraordinary. It's happening every moment, every day in your own home. Just because you have a vision, it doesn't mean that it's a big event in life.
There are many sort of mental illnesses which are perceived to be no different to, say, a gastric disturbance. And the logic is that, of course, you need appropriate mental diet as you need appropriate physical diet, but there could be conditions of the mind and the body which require that kind of chemical intervention. And I was just wondering how our worldview reconciles these modern approaches to treating the mind with the ancient ones.
I repeat, it's nothing ancient or modern. The law is a law, that you cannot treat the mental condition with gross material changes. But you take a sleeping pill and you sleep. It's a different exercise. It's like switching off a light. But you can't change the person's mental condition by physically dealing with it. It's not possible. Neither can, by mental changes, deal with your intellect. So the buddhi, intellect, is subtler than the mind, and the mind is subtler than the body. So any bodily changes cannot affect the mind, really speaking. Do you understand? But there you're playing about with certain conditions, which, see, what I'm talking about, cause and effect. What probably you're talking about, or they're talking about, is, I don't know what they're talking about, is being conducive. Now what I'm trying to say is, it's a mango seed that can produce a mango tree. But if you plant a mango seed in Scotland, it will not grow. And if you plant a mango seed in Ratnagiri, it will grow.
But that's changing, because we're able to manipulate the gene of the mango seed so that it might well grow.
No, I'm talking a different subject now. But I'm driving home a point about conducives. So though the mango seed grows only here, but you can't say the soil produces the tree. It is only the seed that produces the tree. And yet the seed in Iceland or Scotland will not grow there. But you can't say it is the soil that produces the tree. Do you see what I mean? It is conducive for the growth of the seed. That I appreciate. So they're playing with these sort of things, not deliberately, and they're coming to wrong conclusions between cause and effect. I'm dealing with cause and effect. No cause can bring about a subtler change. Gross cause can bring a subtler change. That's my point.
We have in our traditions some of the most sophisticated mind training techniques. And I have often sort of wondered about the value of a pure articulation or a pure intellectual insight.
Right.
And to what degree does that, and in what manner do you recommend in your techniques and in your teachings for that to be translated into actual significant change in one's own responses? So I might be intellectually aware of the negative implications of anger. What are the processes that I need to go through? What techniques that I might follow so that that intellectual recognition can somehow begin to impact my reflex response at a moment? So we have efforts today, for example, in India, to look at the notion of value education, and to look at value education as an aspect of curriculum. So someone can be an excellent scholar of ethics and yet not be ethical.
Ethical, correct.
So how do you bridge what may be purely an intellectual insight and understanding?
Right. You
through
see,
experience?
what brings about a transformation is, like you give the example of anger. See, we explain what is anger. Anger is nothing but a desire thwarted, interrupted. When a desire is interrupted, you get angry. So we explain to you, look here, you have an obsession for a particular thing. It could be for a good cause, it could be for a negative cause, but you have a desire, and that desire is interrupted and you get angry. Now, I give you this information. It is only an information. A teacher, a guru, can only give you knowledge, which is information. But that information has to be reflected upon by the individual taking it for a period of time, depending upon his quality. And when that information is reflected upon for a period of time, it brings about a transformation in the individual. that's the time he becomes wiser with it. The knowledge metamorphoses into wisdom. So no teacher worth the name, no book can give you wisdom, it can give you knowledge. And once you take the knowledge and reflect upon it, assimilate it, absorb it, the knowledge metamorphoses into wisdom. When you gain the wisdom, you live it. And until you gain the wisdom, you could talk about it, you could write books about it, you could lecture, but still be the same.
Tell us briefly, you have written on the symbolism of Hindu gods and rituals. At one level, the Vedanta offers what seems to be a very, how do I put it, a very cerebral and intellectual, a mind-only approach to transformation, to insight, and to growth. What role do gods, in that sense, have in this process of seeking transformation, growth, and self-improvement?
See, in Hinduism, or for that matter, any religion, there's only one God. Hinduism is not polytheistic, as many Hindus believe. There's only one God, and it's called Brahman. The Christians call it Father in heaven. The Muslims call it Allah. But there's only one God. But the manifestations or expressions are various. There's one sun. There are millions and millions of images. So these images are called gods. So Vedanta talks about the infinite formless reality, which is Brahman, which is the supreme God. Since that is not understood or accessible by the lower intellects, they are given symbols to represent that supreme reality. So these symbols are idols. Idols represent the ideal, which is the formless reality.
What value do these have?
These have a value because you are not able to directly conceive the formless. So another additional value is prayer or worship is to pluck your mind from its preoccupation in the world and plant it on God. So you're asked to pray. When you're asked to pray, or when you want to pray, what you really want to do is stop thinking of the world and think of God. But your mind is replete with desires, and as long as there are desires, they pertain to the world, so the mind goes helter-skelter. Such a mind, to pull it from the world and plant it God, is an impossible exercise, or very, very difficult exercise. Therefore, hardly anybody is spiritual in the true sense of the term. So what these great men in the past in India did, this galaxy of sages and saints, what they did is, they were very practical people. So they found out where your mind goes. And wherever your mind went, they planted gods and goddesses. They knew that you are after money. They said money is Lakshmi. Some of them were pursuing knowledge. They said it's Saraswati. Even diseases were deified. So wherever your mind went, you couldn't avoid gods and goddesses. So that is why this country is still spiritual, because of this ingenious plan of converting everything into worship. So this is necessary for people who are not able to directly contemplate on the formless.
What is your practice, Swamiji? Do you work with some forms yourself?
No, it's not necessary. Now, I mean, I would say way back, 55 years, I would have tried all that. But it's graduation. It's like saying it's infancy in spirituality.
So when you graduate, what is the experience? What happened to you? You know, what is when, you know, we keep hearing of nirvana, realization
Right.
and what have you. And I think you put it so marvelously in the way, in your inimitable style of using a contemporary vocabulary to explain something complex. What happens when you graduate?
What happens is you become totally independent of the world. Now you are dependent on the world. If the weather is good, you're happy. If the weather is bad, you're not happy. If the profit goes up, you go up. When the profit goes down, you go down. You have a good person to talk to in this interview, you're happy. If you have a lousy person, you feel, oh God, why did I have this interview? So every little of your children are doing well, you're happy. You're not doing well, every little thing in this world, physical, mental, intellectual, disturb you. So you're caught up in what is known as the dvandvas. Dvandvas means pairs of opposites. The world is nothing but pairs of opposites, and you're caught up in it. But once you gain this wisdom, not knowledge, gain the wisdom, you are free from the dvandvas. It's said your dvandvathita means you cross the pairs of opposites. That is the significance of Lord Ganesha having one of the tusks broken. If you've seen the sculpture of Ganesha, the true sculpture, one of the tusks broken, indicating he has a huge head, means large wisdom. As a result of that wisdom, he is above the pairs of opposites. One tusk is broken. So you feel a sense of emancipation or liberation from this thraldom of the pairs of opposites.
Swami Parthasarathy, thank you very much. And you have, in my sort of moments of samsara, you have indeed brought me happiness with this interview.
Thank you.
Indeed. It's been a great honor.